she's not your real grandma. I heard my daughter-in-law snap at my grandson during the trip, and I smiled. I'd been waiting for that moment. At dinner, I laid out who'd inherit my hidden $50 million fortune. She passed out when she heard the rest. I'm glad you're here. Stick with my story and drop your city in the comments so I know how far this reaches. My name's Eudora. I'm 70, and I used to think I'd seen every kind of humiliation life could throw at me. I was wrong. She's not your real grandmother. That sentence cut through the warm night air like a knife, sharper than anything that ever touched skin. I was out on the porch of our rental cabin, watching my grandson Rhett, just 8, pushing toy cars across the deck when Corinne's voice cracked through the calm. Rhett looked up, confused. What do you mean, Mom? Corinne stood in the doorway, arms folded, nails perfect, that usual sour look on her face. She'd been sipping wine all day, and the booze had loosened her tongue past the point of tact. I mean, she's just your dad's mom, honey. Not real family like us. She's just here because we have to deal with her. Her words landed hard, but instead of the usual sting, something else rose up in me. Relief. After 3 years of playing poor, of letting myself be treated like a nuisance, I finally had the proof I needed. I smiled. Not that fake tight smile I've worn through years of awkward dinners and thankless birthdays, but a real one that came from deep inside, from where I kept every cold comment, every backhanded jab, every time they left me out on purpose. Eudora, why are you smiling like that? That was Hollis, my son, coming up behind her, sounding like I'd just ruined his day. Corinne didn't mean anything by it. She's just tired from the drive. Of course he defended her. He always did. Even when she made me sleep on the pull-out every visit so the guest room could stay nice for company. Even when she handed me dinner on paper plates while the rest of them used her precious china. Even when she made snide little comments about how some folks don't know how to pitch in at family events. Oh, I know exactly what Corinne meant. I said it calm, though my insides were shaking, and that's perfectly fine. That kind of calm only comes when you've been holding something in too long. You're my real grandma, Nana. I don't care what Mom says. Rhett's voice nearly broke me, pure and full of love. But then I saw Corinne roll her eyes, like even that was too much. Rhett, come inside and wash up for dinner. And don't get those clothes dirty on that old couch. The old couch, the one I'd been stuck with during our 3-day trip while Corinne and Hollis took the master and Rhett got his own room. The pull-out mattress was stiff and uneven, but I didn't say a word. I learned a long time ago that complaining only gave Corinne more ammo. Rhett dragged himself inside, and I stayed on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The cabin had been my idea, and my money paid for it, though everyone assumed Hollis footed the bill. Same way they all thought he'd been supporting me since Fletcher died and left me penniless. The irony was just too good. I could hear Corinne's voice echoing through the paper-thin walls, no doubt still going on about the burden of family responsibilities. I'd sat through versions of this rant more times than I could count. How hard it was dealing with an aging mother-in-law, how some folks never figure out how to stand on their own, how sad it is when older relatives become dead weight on their kids' households. What Corinne didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd kept track of every jab, every snub, every calculated moment meant to put me in my place, not out of spite, exactly, but to confirm what I'd long suspected. I needed to be sure of who my son had grown into and what kind of people were shaping my grandson's view of family. I'd been running this experiment for 3 years, and tonight, Corinne handed me the final piece of the puzzle with 8 simple words. My phone buzzed. Roland Beckett, my lawyer, right on time. All set. Are you ready? I fired back a reply. Tomorrow night, at dinner, have everything in place. The plan I'd been building for months was finally locked in. But first, I had to make it through one more night of playing the unwanted tag-along on what was supposed to be a family getaway. I could hear Hollis clinking plates through the screen door, while Corinne griped about having to cook for a crowd. Like feeding 4 people was some kind of marathon. Rhett was talking excitedly about something he'd watched on TV, his little voice full of energy, completely unaware of the resentment humming beneath the surface. I got up slowly, knees stiff from sitting too long. 3 years of pretending to be a helpless, needy widow had taken more acting chops than I knew I had. Tomorrow, the curtain would finally come down. Eudora, dinner. Corinne's voice cut through my thoughts, sharp like I was already late, even though she hadn't called me until just now. I stepped inside and took my usual spot at the cramped table. She'd made spaghetti. She heaped full servings onto her plate and Hollis's, gave Rhett a small kid's portion, and dropped a clearly skimpy scoop onto mine. "There's more if you want it." Her voice was syrupy, but we both knew what it really meant. Old people don't need to eat that much anyway. Hollis barely looked up, glued to his phone, probably skimming through emails even on vacation. Picked up that habit from his father. When the family got uncomfortable, just pretend nothing's happening. Fletcher used to do the same thing whenever his sister came around and took shots at my background. Some things, I realized, get passed down. "So, Nana," Rhett said, twirling spaghetti like it was a science experiment. "Mom said we might not come visit you so much anymore because gas costs too much to drive to your place." I felt Hollis freeze next to me, finally tearing his eyes from the screen. Corinne's cheeks flushed just a little, caught off guard by her son saying the quiet part out loud. "Well," I said, steady and even, "sometimes things change. Honey. People make the choices they think they have to." What I kept to myself was that after tomorrow, visits wouldn't matter anymore. Everything was about to shift. The truth would finally take center stage. Dinner slid by mostly in quiet, interrupted now and then by Rhett talking about his toys or asking when we were going to hike up to the lake. I gave him answers, smiled at his stories, and tucked away every second like it might be one of our last meals together as a family for a long time, while Corinne scraped plates into the sink, making sure mine clattered louder than the rest like it was some kind of statement. I got up and stepped outside. The mountain air had cooled, thick with pine and that damp scent that says rain's on its way. Tomorrow night would be different. The pretending would stop, and my family would finally see who they'd been underestimating these past 3 years. I thought about the $50 million sitting quietly in carefully built accounts, the properties, the stocks that kept growing while I pretended to be some broke-down widow. But mostly, I thought about Rhett and the lesson he was about to get in assumptions, in respect, and what family really means. I let the smile come back as I sank into the old porch chair. Tomorrow couldn't get here fast enough. The morning, after Corinne laid down her little ultimatum, I woke up on that lumpy pull-out sofa, with my back screaming but my mind sharp as ever. I could hear the rest of them stirring in their nice beds, and I thought back to how this all started. 3 years ago when Fletcher died, I'd made a choice even I didn't expect. I didn't tell anyone how much we really had. I kept it quiet. I watched. I wanted to see who they really were when they thought all I had left was need. Fletcher and I had played the long game for 50 years. He'd worked that low-paying job at the electronics plant while I quietly built an investment portfolio that would have knocked people flat. We lived small, old cars, modest house, clipping coupons, not because we had to, but because we knew real wealth grows when nobody's watching. By the time the plant shut down and Fletcher retired early, I was already handling close to $20 million in solid, spread-out investments. The start was the inheritance from my aunt, something I'd never told a soul about. Then came the real estate, in places I'd picked carefully after hours of research. The tech stocks I grabbed before the world caught on. The small businesses I backed that ended up thriving. When Fletcher passed, our net worth had climbed to $50 million, but instead of telling Hollis and the rest of them, I watched what happened when they thought I was broke, and it was brutal. "Mom, we need to talk about your situation," Hollis had said, just 2 weeks after the funeral, sitting in my kitchen, with Corinne next to him, wearing that look she gets when she's pretending to be helpful but can barely hide her annoyance. "My situation?" I asked, already knowing what he meant. "Your financial situation," Corinne jumped in, her voice hitting that note she saved for unpleasant chores she couldn't avoid. "Hollis told me Dad didn't leave much behind, and that I wouldn't be able to afford to stay in the house anymore." I sat quietly, allowing the silence to stretch, watching my son carefully avoid my gaze while his wife mapped out their vision for what remained of my life. "We've been thinking," Corinne went on, "maybe it would be best for you to move to one of those retirement communities. There's a nice, affordable one about 40 minutes away. You could meet people your own age there." Affordable. Translation: cheap enough they wouldn't have to feel guilty about putting me away. "And this house?" I asked softly. Hollis finally met my eyes, uncomfortable but firm. "We think you should sell it and use that money to cover your living expenses." What he really meant was simple: sell the house, live off the proceeds, and don't expect any help from us. I raised this man, sacrificed everything for him, took extra shifts whenever he needed new clothes for school or wanted to play baseball. And now, with his father barely cold in his grave, he was letting me know I was nothing more than a financial burden he had no desire to carry. That day marked the start of a test. Instead of confronting them with the truth, I played along. I sold the house exactly like they told me to. What they didn't realize, though, was that I'd already bought the building where I moved next. The apartment I lived in wasn't rented. It belonged to me outright, yet I allowed them to believe I was barely scraping by each month. "It's so expensive," I told Hollis during one of his increasingly infrequent calls, "but I guess I'll manage." Somehow, it worked exactly as planned. His phone calls grew shorter and farther apart. Corinne stopped inviting me to family gatherings, claiming she didn't want to add pressure by expecting me to contribute to potluck dinners. Invitations for holidays became rare, and when they did arrive, they always included gentle reminders to keep gifts simple and inexpensive. I played my role well, rotating the same 3 outfits, buying store-brand groceries whenever they came by, apologizing that I couldn't afford more generous gifts for Rhett's birthday. All the while, my investment accounts steadily climbed, my real estate portfolio expanded, and what hurt most wasn't their reaction to my pretend poverty, but how quickly they'd accepted it. No one asked if I needed help. No one offered to ease my financial burdens. They simply decided that distance and lowered expectations would solve the inconvenience of having me around. Corinne, especially, embraced my newfound status with enthusiasm that came dangerously close to cruelty. During visits, she'd often remark about how some people needed to learn how to budget better. She suggested shopping at thrift stores, offering it up as friendly advice instead of thinly veiled contempt. She even volunteered to teach me how to clip coupons more effectively, oblivious to the fact I'd mastered couponing long before she'd even been born. But worst of all was how she undermined my relationship with Rhett. Slowly, deliberately, she taught my grandson that I mattered less than other relatives, that my company was endured rather than enjoyed, and that love and respect were things you earned through financial support. "Nana can't come to your school play, honey," I once overheard her telling Rhett. She couldn't afford the gas and didn't want the awkwardness of asking for help. I could have easily flown out for his school play and booked a hotel after, but I didn't. I stayed home, watching my grandson learn that money decided who showed up for him. Corinne's real talent was in how she masked her exclusion as care. She made it sound like she was shielding me from shame, from guilt, from the strain of pretending I could keep up with their world. In truth, she was quietly cutting me out of Rhett's life while still looking generous to anyone paying attention. Hollis, for his part, just let it happen. When I tried to bring up how distant Rhett had become on our last call, he brushed it off. "He's just busy with school and friends. Mom, kids that age don't really want to hang out with grandparents. Anyway, it's normal." Normal. Like watching a relationship dissolve was some natural part of growing up, not something being carefully managed. But I paid attention. I saw who they were when they thought I didn't count. I took note of every cold remark, every overlooked moment, every time they chose what was easy over what was kind. Then yesterday, Corinne gave me the last proof I needed. She told Rhett I wasn't his real grandmother. That wasn't just disrespect, it was a direct hit at my place in his life. And now, lying on this stiff couch while they all slept easy, in warm beds, I felt something I hadn't in 3 years: anticipation. Tonight at dinner, the act would end. No more smiles, no more pretending. The truth would land hard. I grabbed my phone and pulled up my investment apps, scanning the numbers. 52 million now, thanks to some smart plays in renewable energy. More than enough to secure Rhett's future without relying on whatever planning his parents could muster. More than enough to rewrite this family from the ground up. In the kitchen, I heard Corinne starting the coffee, probably wondering why the old lady hadn't gotten off the couch yet to make herself helpful. Funny, in under a day, she'd be the one wondering what her place really was in this family. That thought made me smile as I forced myself upright, ready to put up with one last day of being treated like some worn-out relic I'd never actually been. The morning rolled out the way it always did on these family trips. Hollis buried himself in emails while pretending to unwind. Corinne took forever getting ready to walk a mile. Rhett bounced between restlessness and boredom. I did what I always did, offered to clean up, apologized for moving slow. But something in me had shifted, and I saw Corinne pick up on it. "You seem energetic today," she asked. eyeing the way I moved through the dishes faster than she was used to seeing. Her voice had that certain edge she used whenever something didn't line up with how she thought things should go. I told her honestly that I'd actually slept better than I expected. That awful mattress had felt like a luxury compared to the weight I'd been carrying around for the past 3 years. There was a lightness in me that morning, knowing tonight would bring an end to the whole act. When we finally headed out for the hike around the lake, I kept up easily, surprising everyone. For 3 years, I'd been playing the part of a tired, fading woman who needed constant breaks and extra help, but today, I moved like someone who'd been quietly taking care of herself, saving her strength for a moment, just like this. "Nana, you're walking really fast," Rhett said, his little legs hustling to keep up with my new pace. "I feel good today, sweetheart," I told him, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "Sometimes we surprise ourselves with what we can do, don't we?" He glanced back at me, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "Mom, are you sure you're okay? You seem different." If only he knew how different everything was about to get. The lake was stunning, lined with tall pines and catching the morning light like it was scattered with diamonds. Rhett started hunting for cool rocks right away, while Hollis and Corinne unpacked a whole picnic like they were planning to spend the day. They'd brought a stocked cooler, folding chairs, even a little speaker for music. I'd been handed one water bottle and a granola bar, like I naturally needed less than everyone else. I found myself watching them all with fresh eyes, like I was studying a strange group I'd never really seen before. Hollis sat in his fancy chair, flipping between his phone and throwing worried glances my way. He'd gotten his father's height and my stubborn jaw, but somewhere along the road, he'd lost the gentle heart I used to see in him as a kid. When did it get so easy for him to brush off his own mother's needs? When did family start getting weighed out in money and convenience? Corinne hadn't changed at all. I'd just been too hopeful to admit who she really was. She lounged like royalty, giving Rhett the occasional warning about staying away from the water without moving an inch to watch him. Every few minutes, she'd take another selfie, making sure the background looked perfect, keeping me out of every shot. "Rhett, come take a picture with Mommy and Daddy," she called, tapping her lap with her perfectly polished nails. As they posed for their little magazine moment, it hit me that I'd never once been in any of their vacation photos. For 3 years, I'd been the ghost at the edge of the frame, present but never seen. Years from now, when they flipped through their albums, no one would know I'd been here. The thought should have stung, but it made me laugh inside. By tomorrow, they'd be falling all over themselves trying to prove how much they'd always wanted me around. "Nana, want to see my rock collection." Rhett had slipped away from the camera session and come back to me, his tiny hands full of smooth stones. "They're beautiful," I told him, turning each one over with real interest. "You've got a great eye for rocks." He lit up at that, settling beside me on the old log I'd chosen over one of their deluxe chairs. For the next hour, we built rock castles and made up stories about the fish swimming in the clear water. This was what I'd missed the most during the years Corinne had quietly shut me out. Not the big events or holiday dinners, but little moments, like these with my grandson. These were the memories we were supposed to be making all along. "Rhett's really taken with you," Hollis said, finally putting down his phone and giving us his full attention. "It's like he's not just getting his turn, he actually wants to be around you." "We get each other," I said, steadying Rhett's hand as he balanced a stubborn rock on top of our bankastle. "It's sweet," Corinne chimed in, though her voice made it clear she didn't think so. "I just hope he's not getting too attached. Kids need to understand that people can't always stick around." The comment landed hard, especially with Rhett right next to us. My jaw tightened. She was already making room for me to disappear, planting seeds for the day I'd be erased. "People should be able to count on family," I said quietly, locking eyes with her. Something about the way I said it made her sit up straighter. "Well, sure, but within reason. Folks have to be realistic about what others can actually give." "Of course," I nodded, my smile making her uneasy. "People absolutely should be realistic about that." The topic shifted, but I caught her watching me for the rest of the afternoon, more alert now. She could feel something was different, though she couldn't put her finger on it. As we started gathering our stuff to head back to the cabin, I made my move. "I've been thinking," I said, slinging my backpack over my shoulder, with a kind of spark that threw them off. "We should do a real family dinner tonight. Something special, Mom. We already said we're ordering pizza, Hollis reminded me, looking wiped from the short hike. It's just easier. Oh, I know, I said, all smiles, but I'd really like to cook for everyone. It's the least I can do. You've all been so flexible, letting me tag along on this trip. Corinne's eyes narrowed. She was used to me sounding grateful. But now there was something else under it, something that pressed back. You don't have to go to all that trouble, she said slowly. The cabin's kitchen isn't exactly made for anything complicated. I'll make it work, I told her. I'm more capable than people assume. That night, I stood in that cramped little kitchen, cooking what would be our final meal as a family, still pretending to be whole. I felt this strange mix of grief and relief. I was about to take a hammer to the pretty little lie they'd built for themselves, but I was also going to free us all from it. Smells good in here, Hollis said, walking in as I finished the last few touches on the meal, one that cost more than they'd guess. I'd made a separate trip earlier, gone into town and spent what it really took. I wasn't budgeting. Today, found some great steaks on sale. I lied icily, figured we should have something nice for our last night together. Last night, Corinne asked, stepping into the doorway, sharp and watchful. Of the vacation, I said. We both knew that wasn't what I meant. As I called them in for dinner, 3 years of watching, waiting, and keeping quiet finally settled into place. Tonight was the shift. The act was over. The truth was ready, and they were about to learn exactly who they'd been brushing off all this time. I gave the cabin one last look, locking in the picture before things flipped. By morning, they'd realized just how wrong they'd been about control, wealth, and what loyalty in a family really meant. The table was set, the food was done, and Roland Beckett stood ready with every document that would redraw our family's future. When I told Rhett to go wash up, I smiled. For real this time. The real talk was about to start. I'd made a dinner that could have come out of a high-end kitchen. Ribeye steaks, roasted veggies with herbs I'd grown before moving into that rundown apartment, and a chocolate dessert that probably cost more than Corinne spent on groceries in an entire week. I watched their faces as they took their first bites, catching the flash of surprise and confusion that replaced the usual polite approval they gave my plain cooking. This is incredible, Mom, Hollis said, slicing through his steak like he meant it. When did you learn to cook like this? I've always cooked like this, I told him, just being honest. You just never noticed. Rhett was plowing through his kid-sized plate, rambling about how it was the best dinner he'd ever had. Corinne was slower, her face shifting as she took in the taste and the clear price tag behind it. Where did you get these steaks? She asked, playing it off with a light tone, but her stare was locked in. They must have been expensive. I found them on sale, I said, repeating the lie like it was nothing, holding her stare without blinking. Sometimes you get lucky. Lucky, she echoed, not buying a word. Right. I put down my fork and reached for the wine I'd uncorked earlier, another detail she'd caught. Not the cheap boxed stuff I usually dragged to these get-togethers. Actually, I said, feeling everything around us come into focus. I think it's time we had a real talk about luck and money, and being honest. Hollis froze with his fork halfway up, his eyes narrowing. He knew from my voice this wasn't just family chatter. Corinne's grip on her wine glass tightened, her instincts firing off alarms she didn't fully understand yet. What do you mean, Nana? Rhett asked, wide-eyed steak juice on his chin. I mean, sweetheart, that sometimes grown-ups don't tell each other the full truth, and that ends up causing problems. Mom, Hollis said, slow and careful now, putting his silverware down. What are you trying to say? I took a long sip of wine, letting the taste sit with me, letting the moment breathe. I'd waited 3 years for this. What I'm saying is, you've all been way off in how you've understood my situation. Your situation. Corinne's voice pitched higher, like it always did when something threatened the little world she kept under glass. I mean my financial situation. I looked right at her, couldn't help noticing how her face was starting to drain of color. When Fletcher passed, every one of you jumped to conclusions about what he left me, what I had to live on, what kind of life I'd be left with. Hollis was watching me now, not even touching his plate. Mom, what are you talking about? Are you saying? I'm saying your father and I were a hell of a lot smarter with money than any of you gave us credit for. I reached into my bag and pulled out my tablet, tapping to the summary page of my portfolio. Way smarter. The number on the screen hit Hollis hard enough that his jaw actually dropped. 52, 3, turned in $47,891. That's not possible. Corinne's voice was barely audible as she leaned closer, staring at the screen like it was pulling some trick on her. It's all real, I told them. The investments, the property, the trust funds, all of it. The only thing fake was the little act I've been putting on the last 3 years, pretending to be broke. Hollis shoved his chair back, the legs screeching against the floor. Pretending, Mom? What the hell is going on? I was testing you. I kept my voice even, though my heart was racing. 3 years of watching how you'd treat me when you thought I had nothing left but need. The quiet that followed felt like it might never end. Brett's breathing was loud in the stillness, the wall clock ticking, wind outside brushing through the pines. Inside, the three of them sat there, wrestling with the wreckage of what they thought they knew about me, about each other. Corinne cracked first. You're lying. Her voice climbed, laced with fear. This is some sick joke. No joke, I said, swiping through the tablet to show the rest. Properties, stocks, municipal bonds. Though it is a little rich, hearing you throw around words like cruel, but the apartment. Hollis stuttered. The stress, the money issues, the way you double quotes, the way I what? I cut in. The way I let you all treat me like a problem. The way I let you shut me out of birthdays and holidays because I supposedly couldn't chip in. The way I kept quiet while Corinne told my grandson I wasn't really part of this family anymore. Hollis's face went pale. He glanced at his wife, who was still frozen, staring at the numbers like she could will them away. You were testing us, he said. It wasn't a question. The truth had finally landed. For 3 years, you've been testing us. And you blew it, I said flatly. Completely. Corinne shot to her feet, knocking her chair over with a loud bang. This is crazy. You don't get to lie to your family for 3 years and then pin us as the bad guys, don't I replied, still in my seat, while she stood over me. Because, from where I'm sitting, all I did was give you room to show who you really are, when you thought there was nothing to gain. We looked after you, she yelled, totally losing control. We brought you on trips, we called, we came to visit. You sidelined me, I corrected, steady and clear. You handled me like I was a chore you couldn't avoid. You made sure I missed the things that mattered, while patting yourselves on the back for showing up once in a while. Rhett kept glancing between the grown-ups, his little face growing more confused. Why is everyone yelling? Nana, why is Mom so mad? I reached out and held his hand. Sometimes grown-ups argue over serious things, sweetheart. But don't worry, it's going to be okay. No, it's not going to be okay, Corinne snapped, her voice cracking. You lied to us, you played us. I watched you, I said, my voice turning cold, and what I saw was that the second you thought I was broke and desperate, you couldn't distance yourselves fast enough. You made me feel like a burden, cut me out of decisions. Worst of all, you started showing Rhett that love depends on what someone can offer. Hollis finally spoke up. Mom, if you had just told us, told you what? I cut in. That I had money, then what? You'd suddenly remember how to be decent to me, suddenly feel love again. You'd stop letting your wife poison my grandson against me. That word, poison, landed like a slap. Corinne stumbled back, hand reaching for the wall. That's not, I never, she started, but the words caught in her throat. She knew there was nothing to say. Yesterday, I pressed on. You told Rhett I wasn't his real grandmother. That's when I knew. You don't just treat people based on what they can give you. You break relationships that don't benefit you. Corinne's breath came faster, her face draining color, then flushing, over and over, as the weight of it all hit her. I think I'm gonna be sick. And then, like the universe was underlining everything I'd just said, she did the last thing I expected. Something I'd never forget. She passed out. Corinne dropped to the floor like her strings got cut, her body landing on the wood with a flat thump that filled the room. Hollis rushed to her, dropped to his knees beside her. Rhett stood frozen, staring. Mom, Corinne, can you hear me? I stayed seated at the table, calmly finishing my wine, while my daughter lay passed out on the floor. After 3 years of quietly engineering her downfall, watching everything crash down on her gave me nothing but satisfaction. Is she okay? Rhett asked, his voice small and unsure. She'll be fine, I told him, though truthfully I didn't care much either way. Sometimes it just hits people hard when they realize how badly they've messed up. Hollis looked up at me from where he knelt next to Corinne, his face a storm of shock, anger, and maybe the start of understanding. What now? He asked quietly. I smiled. took another slow sip of wine. Now, we finally talk about what's next. Once your wife comes to, of course, the test was over, the results were undeniable, and the real talk about what's ahead for this family was only just getting started. 10 minutes later, Corinne came to, her eyes blinking open to see Hollis hovering above her with a cool towel, and Rhett peeking over his shoulder, worried. I had moved into the living room, giving them space, still calm, still in control. What happened? She mumbled, trying to sit up until the memory hit her like a truck. Her eyes locked onto mine across the room, and I watched the last bit of hope leave her face when she realized it hadn't been a bad dream. You passed out, Hollis said gently, helping her sit up against the kitchen cabinets. When Mom showed us, when she told us about the money, Corinne said, her voice flat and empty. She really has $50 million, $52 million, I corrected from the couch. As of this morning's market close, the exact figure hit her like another punch to the gut. This wasn't some vague inheritance or locked up assets. This was cash, available, real, powerful, and I'd had it all along while they treated me like some burden they were stuck with. Hollis helped Corinne to her feet and got her into a chair. At the kitchen table, Rhett had gone back to his toy cars, sensing the tension but too young to understand it. Watching him play quietly while the ground shifted under his family made my chest burn with a kind of fierce, protective anger. I need to understand, Hollis said, sitting down across from his wife, but keeping his eyes on me. You've had this money for 3 years. You watched us go back and forth over how to take care of you, whether to include you in holidays, whether to— He stopped, realizing just how deep the lie had gone. You let us think you were broke. I let you be yourselves, I said, steady. I didn't make you treat me like that, Hollis. I just gave you the chance to show who you really are when you thought there'd be no fallout. Corinne's hands shook as she reached for her water. But why? Why would you do this to us? She sounded so honestly confused. It almost tugged at something in me, almost because I had to know. I said plainly, after Fletcher died, I realized I didn't know my own family anymore. I needed to know who you'd turned into, who you chose to marry, and most of all, what kind of people would be shaping how my grandson grows up understanding loyalty to family. So you kept the truth from us for 3 years, Hollis said, his voice tight and controlled. You played us, set traps, and waited for us to fail. I watched you, I answered, cold. Every move you made, every choice, every way you treated me, that was all on you. I just didn't bother correcting what you assumed about my money. Corinne leaned forward fast, her eyes suddenly sharp and calculating. But now that we know the truth, everything can change. We can wipe the slate clean. We can— No, I cut in. We can't start fresh. You can't unsee who you really are. And I can't pretend I didn't learn what I did about both of you. The way I said it seemed to drain the last bit of color from her face. What's that supposed to mean? I reached into my purse, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and placed it on the coffee table right where they could all see it. It means I've made decisions about what comes next, about my will, my assets, and where I stand with this family. Hollis swallowed hard, his throat visibly moving. Mom, whatever it is you're thinking, I'm not thinking, Hollis. I've already done it. I opened the envelope and took out the first document. A new will. My lawyer drew up exactly how I wanted. My estate's going into a trust for Rhett until he turns 25. The trustees won't be family. It'll be my attorney and a professional financial firm. Corinne let out a sound like air escaping a tire. You're cutting us off completely. I'm making sure Rhett has what he needs to build a future. Whether or not his parents can budget or grow up doesn't matter anymore. I pulled out the second document. That said, there are conditions. Conditions? Hollis asked, voice guarded. The trust only stays in place if Rhett keeps a real, direct relationship with me, one that's not filtered through the two of you. If either of you tries to turn him against me, keep him from seeing me, or damage our bond in any way, the money goes to charity. The room went so still I could hear Rhett's toy cars rolling across the hardwood in the other room. You can't do that, Corinne whispered, though her tone said she knew damn well I could. I can, and I have, I told her. On top of that, there's a separate fund just for Rhett's education, health, and general needs. It'll be managed separately. You won't be able to touch it, but you also won't have to cover the big stuff out of your own pocket. Hollis stared at the documents like they were in another language. So you're basically paying us to let you stay in Rhett's life. I'm protecting myself and my grandson from what you've already shown you're willing to do. Cut family out when it suits you, I corrected him, sharply. You've spent the last 3 years pushing me out of Rhett's world, piece by piece. Now you're looking at the next 17 years, making sure it never happens again. Corinne's breathing was getting shaky again, and for a second I wondered if she might actually pass out twice in one day. This is blackmail. No, this is what happens when actions finally come with consequences. For 3 years, you assumed I had no voice, no backing, no way out. You were wrong across the board. I pulled out the third document, the one I knew would hit Hollis the hardest. He asked about it, though his voice gave away that he really didn't want the answer. I'm moving. That apartment I've been in. I own it, always have, but it was never meant to be permanent. I bought a house, about 2 hours out. Close, enough for Rhett to visit often, but far enough that I get to breathe again. 2 hours, Hollis's voice cracked a little. Mom, that's far enough that seeing you won't just be something that happens by default. Exactly. No more dinner invites where I sit there like a stranger. No more family trips where I'm crashing on a pullout and expected to smile about it. If you want a relationship with me, you're going to have to show up for it. Corinne finally spoke, but it sounded distant, like she was still catching up to what was happening. What if we don't agree to what you're asking? I gave her a smile, but there was nothing warm about it. Then, Rhett still gets it all when he turns 25, but you'll spend the next 20 years knowing your treatment of his grandmother cost your family $52 million. That landed hard. I could see it on their faces. The panic, the math, the searching for some angle that might fix this. You said you wanted to protect Rhett from learning that love has strings attached, Hollis said, grasping. But isn't that exactly what you're showing him? That your love comes with conditions? No, I answered, steady. My money does. My love for Rhett never changed, even with all your efforts to ruin that bond. But as for continuing to bankroll people who've made it clear I don't matter, that ends here. I stood up, smoothed out my dress, and got ready to end it clean. You've got a choice. You can take this offer and start over with some real respect between us. Or you can walk away and be the one who explains to Rhett someday why his college fund ended up going to charity instead of him. Corinne was crying now, full on, tears running down her face as it hit her what she'd really done. We didn't. No, she cried. If we'd known about the money, ... If you had known about the money, I said, you would have treated me right, but only because it made sense for you, not because I was your family. That's not love, Corinne. That's playing the game. Hollis sat with his head in his hands, finally seeing it. 3 years of pushing me aside, watching his wife cut me out of family moments, treating me like a task instead of a person. What do you want from us? He finally asked, his voice low and muffled behind his hands. I want you to choose who you really are, I said flatly. You can be the kind of people who love family no matter how much money they have, or the kind who only show up when there's something in it for them. But you don't get to be both. And you don't get to act like the last 3 years didn't happen. I walked over to the window and stared out at the lake where Rhett and I had been stacking rocks into castles just a few hours ago. Tomorrow, we'd pack up and drive in separate cars, heading back to separate lives. They'd go back to their normal routine, knowing full well that everything had shifted. I'd start from scratch, building a new version of my life. You've got tonight to think about it, I said, still facing the glass. In the morning, let me know what you've decided. Behind me, I heard Corinne's soft crying and Hollis whispering to calm her down, but I felt nothing for their sadness. They built this mess, piece by piece, with their decisions, their blind spots, their quiet, practiced cruelty. Now it was theirs to sit in. I woke up the next day to hushed, urgent voices leaking through the thin walls from Corinne and Hollis's room. They hadn't slept much. From the bits I caught, they were still turning things over, hunting for some loophole, some way to claw back the upper hand. But there wasn't one. Rhett was already up, sitting at the little kitchen table, swinging his legs as he spooned cereal and hummed a tune to himself. When I walked in from the lumpy couch I'd slept on, he looked up and smiled, clear-eyed and easy. Morning, Nana. Are we going home today? We are, sweetheart, I said, brushing my hand through his hair as I passed to start the coffee. Are you excited to see your room again? I guess, but I liked building rock castles with you yesterday. Can we do that again sometime? That simple ask tightened something in my chest. I hope so, Rhett. I really hope so. Hollis appeared in the doorway then, looking like the night had taken a real toll. His hair stuck up, his eyes bloodshot, and every move looked like it cost him something. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I glanced over at Rhett, still focused on his cereal, untouched by the tension swimming around him, and nodded. We stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool and sharp in that fresh, mountain way, and the lake lay there, calm and steady, like it didn't care what happened here. "We're ready to accept your terms," Hollis said. No build-up, voice raw and worn down. I watched his face carefully, trying to read whether this was clarity or just desperation. All of them, all of them. He wiped both hands down his face. "Corinne's not thrilled, but she gets that we're out of options. This isn't about picking what we want, Hollis," I said, keeping my tone steady. "This is about who we are. If you're only agreeing because you feel boxed in, then there's nothing honest between us." He didn't respond right away, just stared out at the water like he was trying to find something out there. When he did speak, his voice barely carried. "I let you down, didn't I? As your son, I really let you down." The words landed harder than I expected. I'd waited 3 years to hear them, but now that they were here, all I felt was the ache of what we'd lost and the hollow space where a bond used to be. "You let yourself down," I said quietly. "You turned into someone I couldn't recognize. Someone who watched his wife slowly push his mother out of the family and stayed quiet. Someone who stood by while his own kid was taught that love had to be earned and said nothing." Tears rolled down his cheeks, and for a second, all I saw was the boy who used to cry if he stepped on a bug in the yard. He'd had a kindness back then that got buried under years of Corinne's grip and his own choices. "Can you forgive me?" he asked, voice raw and honest. "I can work toward forgiving you," I answered carefully. "But forgiving doesn't wipe the slate clean. The past 3 years still happened, Hollis. The way you treated me, the way you let me be treated, the damage it did between me and Rhett, that's real." He nodded, feeling the weight of it. "So, what do we do now?" "Now, you show me you mean what you say. Not with some big performance or dramatic apology. You show me by how you act, consistently, respectfully, over time. You remind me I'm your mother, not some task you have to manage." And Corinne, I glanced through the screen door. She was sitting at the kitchen table, swollen-eyed, holding her coffee like it was the only thing keeping her from tipping over. She was staring blankly, trying to make sense of a world where she no longer had control over every piece of the family. "Corinne's going to have to decide who she wants to be," I said. "She can start treating me with respect, or she can keep seeing me as the problem in her perfect little setup. But she can't do both. And whichever she picks is going to decide how much access she has to the money that'll shape Rhett's future." Hollis flinched at how clear I made the stakes. "She's scared." "She should be," I said, not offering comfort. "She spent 3 years trying to erase me from Rhett's life and treated me like I was on her payroll. Being scared is what happens when you finally realize there are consequences." We stood there a moment, watching Rhett through the window as he finished his cereal and made his way over to the toy box. His little world was untouched by all this, which made it even harder to look at. "I want him to know his grandmother," Hollis said out of nowhere. "The real you, not the version Corinne's been feeding him." "Then you'll have to put in the work to make that happen," I told him. "No more letting it slide when Corinne takes her shots at me. No more letting her shut me out of family plans or acting like including me is some kind of favor instead of a shared responsibility." "I get it now. I hope you do," I told him, and I meant it. "Because this is your last shot, Hollis. I'm not going to waste another 3 years pretending it doesn't sting to be treated like a guest in my own family." 6 months later, I was in the sunroom of my new place, watching Rhett help me care for the herb garden we'd planted together. The 2-hour drive turned out to be just far enough to make visits a conscious choice, not an obligation, and that made all the difference. Hollis came by every other weekend, sometimes with Corinne, sometimes on his own when she had too much going on. I figured the solo visits were his way of patching things up without dealing with her hostility, and I respected that. Watching Corinne adjust to the new reality was tough, but it had to happen. She cycled through a few tactics: moody silence, fake cheer, staying away on purpose, before landing on a kind of careful politeness that held steady even if it wasn't exactly warm. "She's never going to like me," I told Hollis one evening. "Probably not," he said plainly. but she's learning to respect you, and maybe that's enough. I decided I didn't need fake bonding or forced smiles. I needed to be seen for who I am in this family, Rhett's grandma, Hollis's mother, and treated accordingly. Corinne didn't have to like me to do that, and I didn't have to trust her to accept it. The real win was Rhett. Without his mom's quiet sabotage, our bond grew into something real, something better than I'd let myself hope for. Every other weekend, he came to my place, helping me cook old recipes, digging in the garden, soaking up stories about his grandpa and the parts of our family Corinne never bothered to ask about. "Nana," he said as he gently moved a basil seedling into fresh soil. "Mom says you're really rich. Is that true?" I smiled. He always got straight to the point. "I am, sweetheart. Does that change anything between us?" He thought about it seriously, the way he always did with questions that mattered. "I don't think so. You're still the one who builds rock castles and makes the best pancakes. Money doesn't change that, right?" "Right," I told him. My heart ached in the best way for this sharp, sweet boy. Money doesn't change who we are, but sometimes it shows who other people really are. He nodded, thinking it through, then lit up with a new idea. "So does that mean I can go to any college I want?" "It means you'll have choices," I told him, "but you'll still have to work hard and make smart decisions. Money might get you in the door, but you're still the one who has to step inside." That night, once Hollis picked up Rhett and headed back home, I settled into my favorite chair, with a hot cup of tea and the quiet satisfaction that comes after a good, full day. My phone buzzed, a text from Hollis. "Thank you for today. Rhett hasn't stopped talking about the garden." I typed back, "Same time in 2 weeks. Of course, drive safe." Things weren't perfect between us. Maybe they never would have been, not after the way the last 3 years played out. But at least now we were honest, with each other, with ourselves. It was real now, built on truth instead of guesses, on respect instead of obligation. I found myself thinking about Corinne. She was probably sitting somewhere calculating compound interest on $52 million. Maybe even wondering how things would have turned out if she'd made different moves. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd tried so hard to cut me out, and all she really did was write herself out of the family for good. But more than her, my thoughts stayed on Rhett and the kind of man he'd grow into. He'd grow up understanding that family doesn't hold itself together on its own. It takes effort. It takes showing up with respect. He'd know money is just a tool. It doesn't decide what a person's worth. And he'd carry with him the fact that his grandmother stood her ground and stayed in his life. No matter who tried to push her out, the test had come and gone. The outcome was final. And for the first time in 3 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Home, on my own terms, with my dignity untouched and my future set. Outside, the first stars were starting to break through the night sky. Tomorrow would bring its own set of challenges and chances to shape the kind of family I wanted, not just accept what others tried to hand me. I lifted my cup in a quiet toast to the 70-year-old woman I'd become, the one who finally understood that real victory sometimes means refusing to shrink to fit someone else's limits. The show was over. The truth had finally done its job, and I had never felt more at peace with exactly who I was. It's been a year now, one full rotation around the sun since that dinner where I broke the silence and shattered every false smile in the room. And in that time, I've learned something I didn't expect. I'm not angry anymore. I don't forgive them. That's different. But I've stopped holding it like a knife between my ribs. The need to prove something, to make them see me, to drag them into a version of the truth they kept stepping around, that died that night. What stayed is cleaner, sharper, the kind of knowing that doesn't need permission. I live alone in a single-story brick home in a quiet Georgia town 2 hours south of where they still play house. It's not flashy. The streets lined with oak trees that drop enough leaves in fall to make you curse every rake you own. But the neighbors wave, the butcher knows my name, and no one here thinks I'm anyone but Eudora from down the street, the lady with the overgrown garden and the firm handshake. That suits me just fine. Rhett comes on the 2nd and 4th Saturday of every month. He arrives with his backpack slung too low and eyes that still search for approval like it might run out. He's quieter these days, more watchful. He doesn't say much about his mom, but when he hugs me, it's tighter than before. Like he understands I'm something solid. Like he knows, in his own 8-year-old way, that I stayed when others didn't. We cook. We dig, we talk about the moon and which bird makes which sound. I tell him stories, real ones, about his grandfather's hands and the old Toyota that took us up and down the state selling antiques from flea markets. He listens like the world depends on it. That's my new wealth. Not the accounts, not the houses or the lawyers who still call to check in. It's those small eyes looking at me like I'm worth listening to. Hollis tries harder now. He comes with Rhett sometimes, helps fix whatever needs patching, brings fresh coffee, and asks real questions. There's a hauntedness behind his eyes he didn't have before. Like he's living next to his own regret and trying not to let it grow teeth. I don't make it easy for him. I make him sit with it. Sometimes he asks what would have happened if he'd acted sooner. If he'd spoken up, drawn the line with Corinne, protected me when I was being stripped of my place one paper plate at a time. I don't answer. The past isn't a door you can kick back open. Corinne hasn't set foot in my house, not once. The trust lawyers know she doesn't get a dime, and I think that eats her alive more than anything else. But I don't wish her harm. I just wish her absence. She chose the role she wanted in this family, queen of a shrinking kingdom, and now she's stuck with it. At night, I walk my own land. The air's clearer here, and I can hear the sound of owls in the trees. Sometimes I think about all the things I held back, the bitterness I let pass, the birthday parties I watched from the far corner of the room, the dinners I cooked while they talked around me like I was a ghost with hands. I don't mourn it anymore. I use it. Every dollar I spend now is a decision made with clarity. I donate, in Fletcher's name, to causes we once whispered about when we had nothing. I fund local girls from small-town high schools to attend college without owing anyone their dignity. I sponsor 3 single mothers, quietly, through the same church, that used to offer me cold coffee and fake smiles. I give because I can, not because someone expects it, not because I need to earn my place. One morning Rhett asked, "Nana, were you ever scared when you were pretending to be poor?" I didn't answer right away. The truth is, yes, every damn day. Not scared of losing money. I knew that was safe, but scared of losing him. Scared that the slow erosion of presence and affection would win, that one day he'd forget how it felt to sit beside me, skin warm from the sun, hands full of basil and stories. But he didn't forget, and I didn't fade. That's the real inheritance I'm leaving behind, not the millions, not the trust, but the proof that one woman, if she's clear and steady enough, can change the course of her family without yelling, without begging, and without becoming someone else to survive. The world didn't crumble when I told the truth. It cracked, then settled. Now, the soil's better, the air's clean, and I have my own name back. I'm Eudora, I'm Sepiwan. I built a new life from the ashes of silence, and I'll be damned if I ever let anyone write me out of it again. The story we shared is fictional, but drawn from real situations. Names and places have been changed to protect those involved. We don't tell this to judge, but to offer a moment of reflection. How many mothers are silently suffering inside their own homes? And truly, if it were you, in my place, what would you do? Would you stay silent to keep the peace, or speak up to reclaim your life? I'd love to hear your thoughts, because every story is a candle, lighting the way for someone else. God bless, and I believe courage leads us to better days. While you wait for those days, I've left 2 other stories on the screen, our most beloved ones. I know they'll surprise you. Thank you for staying until the very end.